The complete set of the small size gold certificates. Well, unlike all the other ones where I've been showing actual bills, with the exception of the top 6 here, the rest of these are basically either not available to collectors at all or so rare that I don't know that any specimens are known to exist outside museums. But it is still of interest to see how these things look, and also to see the similarities and differences between the Series 1928 and the Series 1934s, which of course all Series 1934s are impossible and illegal for an ordinary collector to own, no matter how rich you are. So up here, of course, we have our familiar 10, which we basically saw a real one in the previous video. And a 20, we saw one of those. There's also 50s, which are also fairly reasonably obtainable to collectors, and hundreds that are also reasonably obtainable to collectors. So, not too much interest there. So, back would be usual. These, of course, are not actual small size. These are all copies. So, I'm only showing what they look like, let's say, for educational purposes. So, that's the 10. And the 20, these are, like I said, it'd be similar. As you can see, these are serial number 1. But nothing unusual or different with these. And the 50. So, the 50, as you can see, would have pretty much the same verbiage. Instead of saying gold, it has a gold up here, but just a 50 in there. Gold up there, just a 50 there. So, it's still not quite as much, but it still has the same familiar verbiage, the woods and melon. I thought I could mention, though, that among some of these things, there are some reports of there having been printed some Series 1928As, which, except that they might have woods and mills instead of woods and melon, signatures would be, they'd have a little A under the 1928 or to the right of it, and then instead of woods and melon, it would be woods and somebody else named Mills. So that would be the only other difference. Now, as we get up into hundreds are also fairly collectible too. One can, for probably maybe $800 to maybe a little over $1,000, you could probably get one of these. They're not too bad, but this is of course just a copy. And again, it looks all the same here. This certifies that there have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America $100 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. And by the time you get up to 100, they don't talk about being gold certificate anywhere else, except of course just that the top has that verbiage, and down here it talks about gold coin. And again, over the yellow seal, with the yellow numbers, of course, the phrase gold certificate. The back, of course, still looks like a standard $100 bill up to that point. Now, the Series 1934, however, is somewhat more interesting, and it's a pity that these can't be owned or collected, because there are some minor differences that are of interest. Most obvious, of course, is it's got the Julian and Morgenthau signatures, and it's Series 1934. So that's a fairly big change from the 100. You still have gold certificate. And let's see how the verbiage compares here. This certificate is, they went from a legal tender to just legal tender, in the amount thereof in payment of all debts and dues, public and private. Okay, so very slight change. Instead of a legal tender, this certificate is a legal tender. This becomes legal tender. This certificate is legal tender. All right, now we look at the top. This gets a little bit more interesting, where the 28 said this certifies, in the 34 it says this is to certify that there is on deposit in the treasury of. So slight verbiage change. So instead of this certifies, this is to certify. And down at the bottom, where the 28 had $100 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand, this says $100 in gold. Look at that. They widened out the thing to make room for this additional verbiage. And then the bottom, this is cool. Payable to bearer on demand as authorized by law. Well, who's authorized by law to even accept that kind of gold certificate? gold was now basically pretty much, with a few exceptions, illegal for private citizens to own. But certain banks could still own the gold, at least in the form of these certificates. And it's interesting to see how this came all the way down to the $100 denomination. I noticed, too, that the number 1 serial number note had a rip in it. They kind of held it together and took this picture of it, so at least we get to see it. I don't know how many of this survive. The backs, of course, are somewhat more interesting, especially that, because, of course, they would have this distinctive, goldfish orange color of a gold certificate. The old large-size gold certificates would use this kind of color all the time. But but only the Series 1934 gold certificates, the ones no one's allowed to handle, have that same distinctive pattern in the small size. So that's kind of cool. The next denomination up is a 500. Now this one is also theoretically available to collectors. I say theoretically. I mean, if you don't mind spending, thousands and thousands of dollars, you might be able to find one. I mean, and you can own these. See, this denomination was only made in Series 1928. So, but the verbiage is all the same. The back, of course, after 100, you notice all these big bills have, no more buildings, just all this lace work and $500 on the back. So, but they have the same thing. It's the certificate is a legal tender, and so forth. This certifies that there is in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. So, same old signatures. So that'd be the 500. The next one, once again, this is available both in Series 1928, which collectors, again, would be able to buy if they don't mind spending thousands and thousands of dollars. And the Series 1934. Now, one other thing I'm noticing that's kind of interesting. The Series 1928, they put 100 here, they put 500 here. When you get to the 1,000, this area is blank. It will also be blank for the Series 1928 5,000 and the Series 1928 10,000. It's just a whole big blank area, and it's just not used. So that's kind of interesting. 500 on down and 100, and even, the smaller ones, they'll have 50, 20, and 10 just written out as words. They would have, words or the numbers, but after 1,000, they just don't even bother. Where they did bother for the Series 1934. But again, let's do another comparison. I think you'll find it's the same differences. So here, now this certificate is legal tender instead of this certificate is a legal tender. 34 instead of 28. 34 instead of 28. Oh, they moved this A from this position to that one. Interesting. And of course, or that one to this one. And you got Morgenthau and Julian. That would be appropriate. And again, United States of America. Okay. $1,000 in gold, payable to the bearer on demand as authorized by law. All right, this is to certify that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States. Okay, there we go. That makes sense. So once again, you've got those rather small but interesting differences between the Series 1928 and the 1934. And once again, you have the interesting difference that the 1928 looks like a normal $1,000 on reverse. Again, no more buildings, but just, United States of America, $1,000, and lots of 1,000s everywhere, and lots of scroll work and lace work. The 1934, of course, again, has that extraordinary goldfish orange, print. It's the same print, however. It is not different. It's the same scroll work, the same everything, except that the ink is this orangey yellow color. So that makes that kind of interesting. The next denomination up would be 5,000. You notice, once again, 5,000 does not exist as a Series 1934, but only as the Series 1928. Again, it's blank over here. This certifies that they have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States, $5,000 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. 1928, and so forth. So, still follows the same script and has the usual reverse for a $5,000 bill. Again, now getting up to that, that's getting up into a range where that's the only way to show anything is just with these kinds of simulations. 10,000, once again, $10,000 exists in both a series 1928 and a series 1934. And again, with similar kinds of corresponding differences. So where the 1928 has, this certifies that there have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America. The 34 series has, this is to certify that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America. The same change here. The certificate is a legal tender to just, the certificate is legal tender. We had the signatures of Woods and Mellon. 34 has Julian and Morgenthau. And of course, the biggest difference on the front is where this one has $10,000 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. This is now $10,000 in gold. And it looks like, again, they had to kind of widen that out a little bit. Well, not so much here. They just made the letters narrower. Payable to bearer on demand as authorized by law. So, and once again, the one other really big difference being the color of the ink on the back. Again, the design is, no more buildings in these bigger notes, but just the big numbers. Now, it's interesting, $5,000 bills never use a comma. Not here and not Federal Reserve notes. But 10,000 notes, 10,000 and 2,900,000, there's a comma. There's a $10,000,000. And that goes the same for both of these. And apparently I think that's true front and back, where applicable anyway. So again, that distinctive color that, in the old large size, you could get that color all the time on gold certificates. But here, okay, once again, you've got comma, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, and it's also the same here. Always 10,000. Then you finally get to the big kahuna. This is always the one that people find most interesting. And this, of course, exists only as a series 1934, which is to say one that nobody can legally own. So, but the same verbiage again. There's Wilson on there. This is to certify that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $100,000 in gold payable to bearer on demand is authorized by law. So again, we got Julian, Morgenthau, series 1934. This is legal tender, not a legal tender. And 100,000, 100,000, everywhere, commas. And of course, it's got its own distinctive back, appropriate to $100,000. And again, everywhere you see the figure, it's got the comma there in the middle of it, $100,000. So, that's pretty cool, the really big denominations in the gold certificates. That was one of the things they had. Now, just a quick aside here, since I don't have any really big denominations to show even in just the regular Federal Reserve note, which was the other kind of money that gets fairly large. This too is only a simulated note, not a real one. This shows a 1928 Federal Reserve note. And notice, it's kind of the poor man's gold certificate. I say poor man's ironically here. Redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank. Well, so we'll pay to the bearer on demand $5,000. Series 1928. So it's the normal Federal Reserve note verbiage for Series 1928. And the same back. This is a very clean picture, but this is, after all, simulation. That's all I'm going to have is simulations with this. Now, the Series 34 looks very similar. The scroll work, of course, is all the same. You've got the newer signatures, Julia and Morgenthau. And Series 34 also will pay to the bearer on demand $5,000. However, in this case, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank. No more talk about redeeming it in gold. And the back has the same $5,000 look. So, the last one I can show, another simulation, of course, is a very crude picture of a 10,000. And again, you got the comma between the 10 and the 000 everywhere. And of course, the Series 1928 would talk about redeemable gold on demand. And will pay to the bearer on demand, Federal Reserve note. And again, the same familiar reverse for the $10,000. And you see the comma there everywhere. And I don't even have a simulation for the Series 1934. But it would have the same changes, the different signatures, that it says 34, and no more talk of being redeemable in gold would be the principal differences. So, anyway, that's what I can do to kind of cover the big bills that aren't otherwise obtainable. Big bills, as you know, are either they're heinously expensive if you can find them at all, or they may be just simply unobtainable. Like this and this, you see, being 28, Series 1928, could legally be owned by a private collector. But I don't know that, I have not seen any evidence that any of those are in the hands of a private collector. They may be only held by museums. So, whereas 1,000 on down, at least some few copies are held by private collectors. So that's what there is for that.